Okay, thank you very much for coming back from lunch. We're very aware that these are really comfortable chairs and you have just finished lunch, so this is a dangerous time of day, but we think that this is an important topic for us to cover. For how many years have we talked about data collection? How many destinations, green destinations and others go to, and they say, what am I collecting all this information for? What am I going to do with all this data? Okay, so today we're talking essentially about evidence-based decision making. And you would assume that evidence-based decisions is the rational thing to do, and therefore that's common sense. And what you'll realize is that common sense is not very common. The majority of us use all sorts of ways of justifying our decisions other than the evidence that is in front of us. When we discuss in this panel some of the actions that we have seen elsewhere, but also amongst the organizations that we're advising or that we're part of, is that we tend to listen mostly to the data that we like and that makes us look good, and we tend to underplay or undermine the data that makes us feel uncomfortable. When we see data that confirms that we're doing the good thing, we celebrate that data. When we find data that tells us our activities are not very successful, we say, we need more data. Instead of actually listening to the canary in the mine and saying, actually, this is already a big warning sign and we should do something about it. In how many of your destinations you are so busy with activities, with actions, but you're not particularly good, and I think we can all agree with that. The same happens in my own organization. We all agree with the fact that very often we're busy, but we don't really know how efficient or how effective some of those activities are going to be. This session may feel a little bit like group therapy, okay? In the sense that you need to make yourself a little bit more vulnerable. You need to allow yourself to say, there is room for improvement in my organization in order for you to be able to create the change that we need. If we are all very defensive about all the things that we do, there is no opportunity for change, there is no opportunity for improvement, and then there is little point in coming to a conference like this. If this resonates with you, if the kind of information that I'm talking about makes sense to you, then you've got 7 fantastic panelists. Now, let me start by saying 2 things about the panel. A panel with 7 people is a lot, okay? We haven't done particularly well on the gender balance either, okay? So I have to as a moderator, I should have checked on that before agreeing to be another middle-aged man with little hair to say, oh yeah, I'm going to moderate this. At least somebody else could have moderated it. So please bear with us. Hopefully some other panels are a little bit more balanced than that. Okay? But the reason why these 7 people are here is because all of them have something to say when it comes to the topic that we have today. We have data producers, we have data aggregators, and we have data users. In some of the people that we have in the panel, the same organization does more than one of those roles. Okay? And that makes a lot of sense. So what I'll do is, as I ask the first question, I'll ask each one of the people to introduce themselves, to say a few words about the organization where they work from, and to then say something about what the organization is currently doing at the moment in relation to either producing data, aggregating data, or using the data for certain decision making. I want to spend little time talking about the data production. Mostly I want to talk about data production to be able to then say, I considered the user of the data in the process of data collection. Right? How many times have we seen projects where we collect data without having thought from the beginning, who will use that data? What kind of decisions will they be able to take with the data I'm asking people to collect? Right? We will typically fail when we don't have that user in mind from the very beginning. Happy with that? Panel also happy? It's also a reminder for the panel so they know where we're going with any of this. Okay, so let's start with some of the data producers. Let's talk to a couple of the destinations. Dominique, will start with you, and then Marika will also come to you as well. Because you guys are there at the forefront of working with destination organizations, a wide range of organizations. What does your job look like? What do you do with those organizations? What kind of data you come across? Dominique, we'll start with you. You very proudly, when you met me, you said, I am not from tourism, I am a planner by background. So tell us what your job is and tell us what data you guys produce and also how do you hope that people will use that data?
Yeah, hello. Very challenging subject, data. Very challenging, in fact, also because it's a challenge for me to have this conversation in English with all of you. It's very difficult for me, so I apologize. Data for us is a way to go to action. It's a way to build a story with this data. The usage of the data is very important. First thing is to objectize the findings. We hear a lot of things about data, about sustainability, tourism, but there are facts. And we want to make these facts very concrete, so objective findings. And for what? For share these findings and build a story. Raw data don't tell nothing. We want to give voice to this data, but not only to build a story, but to share this story and go to action. Bring with us all the ecosystem, all the actors, all the touristic actors, to go to action, because there is many solutions. We are here to see the solution.
Okay, so Dominique, I'll try to keep the question short and hopefully the answer short as well, so we have more of a debate. When we say data, what does that really mean? Okay, what kind of, give me one or two examples of sustainability data you say you're collecting in your region or you're starting to collect.
There are many things to say, but one example, mobility data. For example, a few months ago, we asked ourselves the question, is it possible to have access to the main seats of Occitanie by train? So we collected a lot of data of supplies, touristic offer, and all the kind of information about mobility. And so we demonstrated that most of the main seats of Occitanie were accessible within 20 minutes by foot or by cycle from a station. And seems to be trivial, but it never had been done before. So we had the possibility to bring with us all the ecosystem to build package, to build communication specifically, and make easier the journey with. Once again, I'm sorry for my English, but make easier the journey with the train, because it's better with a footprint.
Okay. Good. The audience will notice that we have half the panel is French, half the panel is English, but we thought it would make a better conversation if we all try to speak in English. I am trying really hard to speak more slowly than my usual self, and I'm also trying to encourage the panelists to do the same. So Dominique, one more question to you, and then Marika, we're coming to you across. So many destinations say collecting sustainability data is expensive, okay? And to me, that's an excuse, is not a reason, because collecting economic data is just as complicated as collecting environmental data. Do you see the possibility that your destination could have estimated carbon footprints for different nationalities or different market segments, and that you could use that data together with economic data, length of stay, seasonality, to take market segmentation decisions, to say there are markets we're not going to target because the carbon footprint is too high for the economic benefit that they generate?
It's one of our goals. We try to measure carbon footprint, exactly the greenhouse emission we try to do that at the regional scale. So it's a first step. I can say now I'm able to answer your question precisely and able to segment the different origin of customer, but we try to be better in that way. So
okay.
Yes.
So can I put this in the to-do list, your homework list for every destination in the room? Together with your economic data, at least estimate, doesn't have to be perfect, estimate the carbon footprint data, and then do a cost-benefit analysis. Consider how many euros am I earning for every ton of carbon footprint that that particular type of customer has, and then you can start to take decisions of which are the markets that are most financially beneficial for me, and use this information to take some segmentation data. I know we all believe that we are destination management organizations, but if you look at your budgets, you still are destination marketing organizations. Too much of your budget is dedicated to marketing, therefore you need sustainability data to inform marketing decisions, not only management and planning decisions. One in the list? Good. Marika, we're coming to you now. Tell us about yourself, tell us about your organization.
Good afternoon, everyone. Bonjour à tous. I'm working for the Réseau des Grands Sites de France, Great Site of France network. I'm actually here to represent 53 local authorities, mainly from the rural France, that are in charge of our most beautiful landscapes here in France. You know some of them, Etretat Cliffs, Verdon Gorges, Dunes du Pilat, etc., etc. So those landscapes are protected by law, and also they are the most attractive sites in this country. So they face many challenges, as you could guess, and some of them are really linked to tourism, although they are not exactly tourist actors per se. We are really actually under the responsibility of the Ministry of the Environment, actually. So we are users of the sustainable tourism data, but we are not producers, and we are using them not only for tourism, but for a larger spectrum of projects that are linked to the cultural landscape and the heritage that is in the core of the project.
I mean, Marika, you have a great job, right? You're working...
That's the best job in France, actually.
Yeah, you're working with the best products in one of the countries that's attracting most tourism in the world. Wow.
That's one point of view, yes.
Yeah. But clearly, you also are living with the products that have got the highest pressure from visitors.
Exactly. Yes.
How do you use data to take different give us one example of different management decisions or marketing decisions you have helped some of the destinations you're representing, or how you as an organization taking different decisions? Because clearly you're, by the nature of your own organizations, you are helping to attract even more visitors to the places that are already under a lot of pressure.
Yes, there's actually a subtlety in this, because Great Site of France is a label, but it's a label of recognition of the state that the site is preserved and well managed for the years to come. And indeed, it includes tourism and how we use that data. That's the question you're asking, and how, and give you. I'll try to give you an example of how we could use that data. But first of all, what data are we talking about? We are talking about extremely modern, high technology kind of data, just like everywhere in the world, like anything you can count, anything you can put a number or a percentage. But in the Grand Site, in the Great Site of France, you also rely a lot on the perception of the site, from the visitor perception and also the inhabitant perception. That's really, really important. We are actually trying to maintain a very fragile balance in between the landscape, the environment, the quality of life of its inhabitants, because they are not empty landscapes. They are actually inhabited with people leading their children to school, just like anywhere else. And the third part is the visitor experience. So we are not working, the sites are not working to attract more people, because it's naturally coming to them, but they are trying to respect that balance so that the preservation of the landscape can continue for next generations. For that, they use perception, obviously anything that can help to count how many visitors, how many cars in this parking lot, etc., etc. And also, how is this land changing because of tourism? Is there a lot of secondary homes that are empty as soon as the tourist season is over? Or are there still inhabitants here? There is the kind of data that are very interesting for Grand Site.
So this is great. How do we go from data to decisions?
Yeah, so from that, we have anything we need to make better decisions. As I said before, great site managers are not tourist actors per se. They are actually engineers, territorial engineers, that need to be experts of their destinations, if you want to call them that, or territory, or landscapes. And as experts, they need to use that data to embark their politics with them and take the good decisions. That's as simple as that, in order to respect the trajectory they put together for the project, the main project of the territory.
Okay, so you didn't really answer my question.
Really?
I'll come back to it. I'll give you time to find an example where you say a destination found this data, and from that data, then they decided to demarket, they decided to reduce capacity, they decided to close down second homes, they decided to do hard things, not soft things, that created real change. But I'll give you time. I'll go to Darcy, and then I'll come to you, Laurent. Okay, and probably you can tell that I'm making it up as I go along. But the idea, I want to come to you, Darcy, now to be able to say the two experiences you've just seen here, how representative are they of some of the destinations that, as an organization, you're advising in green destinations?
Well, good question. I would say, I mean, obviously, as you know, we are here in Montpellier and in Occitanie, because we are working with many destinations in this particular region. So in this sense, as we are working elsewhere in France, I would say it's very much along the lines of the way and how and where we're working in France, but also in other countries.
So I hear so often that the civil servants doing the work want to collect more data. They know what the problems are. And almost tourism in many places is a bit like the emperor's, with no clothes, right? We all know what's going on, but it's so difficult to accept that. And there are lobbying groups that basically do not allow for certain changes to happen. I go to conferences like these, we all do, don't we? And you kind of think, well, this reminds me of a conference I went to 20 years ago, because so many of the PowerPoint slides look the same. And so many of the speeches sound the same. And if I hear one more time the word, we are beginning to do something, I will want to kill myself, right? Because, we don't have the time to start things. Do you have examples, actual evidence of destinations that have taken difficult decisions that you then say at the beginning they took risks, but actually it paid off? And how did you as an organization help for that to happen?
Good question. Let me back up to respond to something else that you're saying, because I, like you, have been working in this area for a long time.
Yeah. When you and I started, we both had hair.
Yes, exactly. and exactly, this is the same question that I was talking about 30 years ago in Martinique, for example. Or I did some of the field work for my own PhD study in France. Martinique was a particular case study example. but it, you know, again, I think as we see also with green destinations, and again, just to respond to what you're saying, different destinations are at different stages in the process. And so, you know, whether a place 30 years ago was, you know, at their starting point and, you know, where they are actually today is, you know, is something that, you know, is always curious to know. But I think the, you know, the important part really is that, you know, we have to work with destinations where they are, no matter where they are. Some destinations are much more advanced, some are still starting. But, you know, I think one of the things that I would say in this context in particular, not only in Occitanie, but I think in France, and I would dare to say even for us globally, is that an event like this and work like this that we're doing in Occitanie, in, you know, other parts of France and where we're working as elsewhere around the globe, federates all of us to continue to do more, to continue to do better.
Okay, so the specific example where you've helped somebody take a difficult decision?
Well,
do I need to give you time? Do I need to go to Laurent and then I'll come back?
I'm not working with them in particular, but perhaps, you know, just citing the example that I believe Jana was citing this morning about Expo City Dubai. Coming to us, asking, you know, letting us know that they had this specific ambition to become a certified destination at a very high level. It was not something that we understood from the beginning conversations that they were ready for, but working hard together, not with me, but with other members of the team, you know, we're accompanying them on their successful mission in order to get to where they need to get.
Okay, so guys, I know the question I'm asking Darcy is a little bit unfair, but I think it's a question that many people will ask you if you work for a DMO. Somebody, a journalist or somebody else, will come and ask you specifically, tell me of something like all this effort for sustainability, what did it result in? And could it not have happened anyway without all your effort into this particular area? We need to get into the habit of collecting independent evidence that is undeniable that something changed and that the change is attributable to your work. Without that, you cannot justify your salary and you cannot justify an increase in budget for doing more. So you'll end up being a short-term project as opposed to a long-term engagement. Okay, we'll come back to that. Microphone for Laurent. Laurent, I just met you a couple of days ago, and I'm already in love with what you guys are doing here, okay? With Greencast and the things you were showing me earlier on. It's just really exciting. But so I'll let you tell your story rather than me pretending I know really what you're doing.
Hello, everyone. I'm Laurent from Greencast. It's a sustainable tourism observatory. We analyze in real time massive information at the destination level. We already analyzed several destinations, and what the demand was is for the destination was what are the best sustainable hotels, restaurants in my destination, because I have less than 1% of my offer into a label. So what about the others? So with the tool and the machine learning of the tool and the intelligence artificial with the tool, we analyze every hotel, every restaurant, every activity. And we categorize them into 7 teams and 40 criteria of sustainability. And then DMO said, okay, now I can shortlist the best hotel in water, in biodiversity, in mobility for my destination, depending of the page I wanted to, the strategy of marketing communication I want to build. So first demand for destination, to shortlist the best. Second demand, to see the worst hotel, restaurants, etc. And assist them to be better. Third result with Greencast is to see some information that are not produced. For example, restaurants with a vegan meal. Mm-hmm. So Google has the information, the fork has the information, but the DMO don't. So the tool allows DMO to get this information from scrapping information to the platform and to give it to the destination that will make a short list of restaurants that have a vegan meal, a real vegan meal, not a salad.
So when I first heard about your product, I thought, oh no, not yet again somebody reinventing the wheel. But then when you explained it to me, I realized it's not that at all. I realized just how powerful it can be. And so many of the destinations I talk to, they say, we actually don't have the means for collecting a lot of this data. You know, when we're applying for green destinations or, you know, any other scheme like this, and they say to us, can you tell us what percentage of properties do these or do that, or how do you help your properties identify their weaknesses? They actually don't have the ways of collecting that data. So I see it as such a powerful platform for a destination to be able to identify people at the top, but also how do you bring people up from the bottom? And we all know that destinations and businesses in destination hate benchmarking, but they hate it if they're at the bottom. They quite like it if they're at the top, right? So it doesn't matter what the benchmark is about, they will want to compete in improving some of their performance. So I see it as such a useful tool for that destination management. Do you have any evidence that destinations are not only starting to collect the data, but they're starting to now take different decisions? For example, starting to provide new training for their businesses or starting to provide new services as a result of what they've learned from your data?
Yes, depending to the destination, they observe that they have a big problem for certain destination on water management or energy savings. And this information, this massive information at the destination levels, help them to reformulate the training and the strategy they want to assist their professional. So certainly the massive information in real time produced allow them to redesign their training and their assistance to their operators.
So if you see in a destination, for example, that there's almost no offer on the website of these companies talking about vegan or vegetarian diet, or that the customers have complained online about the limited choice, you can then do targeted training around the issues that are, you know, basically lagging behind. Okay, so that's quite powerful.
Yes, the power of the e-reputation. Some restaurant or some hotel can say he have a vegan meal, but if hundreds of travelers said it was not a real vegan meal, you can consider it's proven data and it's solid.
And since we're here and I have the microphone and nobody can stop me, could I say today at lunchtime it would have been really helpful if the food was labeled based on whether they had fish, meat, or was vegetarian or vegan? I don't understand why that didn't happen in a sustainability conference. Note for tomorrow, please. I mean, food allergies, that would be just amazing if somebody told me about something about food allergies in the food as well, okay? But I'm expecting too much. Moving on, okay? Note for the organizers. Sorry, once you've got the microphone, you can say pretty much anything you want, don't you? And Tarek, we'll come to you, and then we'll work our way back to Jazz and then Polly. Because we've talked about the data collection and the power of data. I would love it if you can tell us a little bit about how your organization is collecting different data, and then we quickly move on to who is using that data.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Tarek, I work for Murmuration. Just a quick note, since I have the microphone, I can say whatever I want. Is that I'm here with two of my colleagues, I think Matuta and Blandine, yeah, right here, because I will fly after this panel. So if you want more information, Matuta and Blandine are here, and we also have a booth, so you can come and talk to us. Now, getting back to the data part and the data consolidation and creation production, what we do. You touched upon a couple of points already when you talked about benchmarking, for example. The data that we have tells stories. Remember what Dominique said, that data are really interesting to tell stories. So we use a data that is available globally, where we have archives globally, and that can tell you the story of this place up till today, and we can project it to tomorrow. So stories. And benchmarks. Since the data is already available and it describes very precisely the sustainability of your destination, we can compare it with your destination with other destinations and so on. If you want a panel where you come first, we cannot guarantee that, but you can test. So that's about the data part. This data is then integrated, processed with artificial intelligence and made available to destinations, be it a region, a department, a local point, a site. We're even working now with the Formula One and other events from the FIA, just to quantify your relation to the environment very precisely with numbers. How am I impacting the environment and how is the environment impacting me? This can be used by different users then. So it can be local operators, regional, national operators. Examples, Malta Tourism Authority has been a loyal user of our data since 5 years, 6 years now, and they are actually helping us co-create the tools that we have. They are using it as well in order to assess the future impact of different climate scenarios on the socioeconomic providers in the destination, monetary impact, social impact, etc., quantified based on data.
So Tarek, let's just go back one step. What kind of data are you talking about? Because
Yeah.
when I first looked at your website, I thought, this is not what most people think of.
Yeah, so what we use is satellite data. We use satellite, usually when we talk about satellite data, and this actually happened like half an hour ago as well, for the 1000th time, is that people think about a photo of their house, a photo from the sky. But satellite data is quite powerful because it has a lot of dimensions. We can quantify the number of aerosols in the atmosphere. We can quantify the amount of chlorophyll in the plants. We can quantify the structures. So to really study the structure, is this a tree? How high it is? Is this a building, etc. So we aggregate this data in order to have really a 360-degree view of the environment in the place. So what does this mean? It means that we work on air, biodiversity, water, human pressure, land use, you name it basically when it comes to environment, and then we consolidate this data assets, so satellite data, with the data wealth that you already have. So it can be flow data that you have, it can be providers, it can be business data, it can be census data, how many people are living in this place, what's their age, etc. To identify parameters. I think, Marika, you talked about it's very important to get also the view of the local community. It's not only about the travelers, it's also about the local community. So we worked in many cases just to show the benefits of tourism developments in a destination for the local population, because this is something that stays. And we have the capacity to go back 20, 30 years in time and to show with each new project, what did this bring from an environmental perspective to the local community.
Okay, I mean, the tool is amazing. Do people know how to use it? In the sense that you can give so much accurate data, you know, it's a bit like you giving me my weight with 3 decimal points. I don't even need the scales to know I'm fat. You know, so like to a certain extent, isn't the main challenge people's unwillingness to actually take action? Do they really need such accurate data, or are the decisions taking very simple anyway?
Yeah, it's a very fair point. Let me tell you something that when we started, as we come from the aerospace industry and so on, we had a very raw approach. Like we provided raw data to people with graphs and so on, and then we told them, okay, just live with that. You know, this is the environment in your area. Thank you. See you next year. You know, for the update. And then we've seen clearly that people do not understand this, and it's not making the impact that we are hoping to make. Right. So now what we do is that, okay, we have the raw data, it's expert data, then we use this data to help people get the certification, for example. So for green destination, there is this aspect. We power some of the criteria with our data, so that's a very concrete case. We have other possibilities, a tool, a standalone tool that helps you play different environmental scenarios and see how it will impact the providers on your area. And this is very tangible. You have red dots that shows you, okay, there will be X number of operators in your area that will be impacted by this scenario or not. We can show you the assets that are at risk from climate change. for example, in 5 years, 10 years, 20, 30, etc., to show you very clearly, okay, this will be the impact in your area, so this way you can take action upon it. So indeed, at the beginning, it was very, I would say, expert-oriented. But now, really, it's if you have time, there is a chance to see a presentation tomorrow by my colleague Matuta with Tarn that will show clearly how the data has been used. Yeah.
This is amazing, and we'll come back to everybody, right? We even haven't done a first round. But this is still about diagnosing the needs or the situations. We still miss that step of then saying, how do we help them to use that to actually take decisions, right? And humans are very good at ignoring things we don't like.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not only that we're ignoring things that we don't like, it's also that I don't have time, I don't have the budget, I have other priorities because they are asking me for growth, right? We've spoken about this. Yeah. How many percentage or nights and so on. What I want to emphasize here is that when you go to a car maker, they do not provide you, tell you the message saying that safety is an option, you would need to pay extra for it, right? Yeah. It's something that you need to integrate in your operation, in a decision-making process. It's not something that is really optional. So if you integrate it, what does this mean? It means that what type of activity can I develop in the low season period, for example. It means what are the schedules that I need to change in the daily activity because I'm going to face next year a heat wave that I know is coming, so let's change the programming of the activity. It means that I need to talk to the power people or the environmental agency and so on because my reputation has been impacted because people say that I'm a polluted destination. So what can I do about it? It can be, let's work on, all of these are very tangible examples that we worked on. It can be that the golf courses are much more better maintained rather than the natural green areas that are open for everybody. And my population is not happy, tourists are not happy because not everybody goes to golf course. So I'm using the water that I have in order to water the golf courses while the natural areas are suffering. So is this something that is sensible to do? And to have these hard discussions with everybody. Usually people get defensive and say, no, to tourism, we are a tourism DMO or whatever, marketing. My goal is not to actually manage these quantities, it's the responsibility of someone else. Well, news, if you don't have your tool, your infrastructure, you will have nobody to work with. So you will just disappear. You mentioned this at the beginning, Xavier, as well. So if you don't take ownership of the environmental situation, as you do for the economic and social quantities, well, your tool, your infrastructure will just disappear. I'll just finish with a very concrete example that might be a little bit shocking, but I will say it anyway, because I have the mic. Valencia, for example, last year, Valencia was devastated with these flooding events and so on. Everybody was very sad about it, really, and even travelers, definitely, who had planned their vacations to go there, were very empathetic about it. But decision-making takes 5 seconds. Okay, too bad, Valencia is suffering, so let me just cancel, click, I booked in another area. Even though I'm really empathetic about what's happening, I'm very sorry for the consequences of it. The decision-making process and the change from a destination to the other one takes 2 clicks.
Tarek, I was that person. I was going to Valencia to give training on environmental communication, and I chose not to go. So yeah, you're absolutely right. We're all hypocrites. You know.
I didn't say that, but you had the mic during this moment.
No, but you know what? When my son at age 10 told me, Dad, you're a hypocrite, you fly to talk about sustainability, that affected me more than any of you telling me. Because when your own son calls you a hypocrite, boy, you remember that. Let me move on. I'll give you a quick fun fact. In 2023, the European Commission looked at how many national tourism strategies included key terms on sustainability. 95% of the European strategies mentioned sustainability, 5% measured carbon footprint, and 0% took decisions based on the carbon footprint data. Can you see the gap between what we say and what we even measure, or we acknowledge that we measure, and then what we do? So you guys will have a lot of work for many, many years to come. Okay, but let's just move from destinations more to businesses. So Jazz will come to you, and then Polly you'll be next. Okay, essentially there is a lot of data. A lot of data is in really messy formats. Everybody seems to collect it in different ways. I'm not even talking about the UK collecting in imperial and somewhere else collecting in metric, right? Like, you can get data in any shapes and sizes, and sometimes it even feels deliberate. The data is collected differently, so it cannot be compared. I'm specifically referring here to airlines and cruise lines, by the way. But that's a different conversation, not for today. You guys have had the difficult job of saying, well, let's make sense of that. Let's put the data into one place. Let's structure it in a way that is going to be usable as an aggregator to the people then have to, essentially insert it into some other tool to then be able to facilitate some change. Walk us through what Because does and how long you've been doing it and what your new plans are.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Jazz. I am the Chief Commercial Officer and one of the co-founders behind Because. And very briefly, what Because is, we are still building and have a live sustainability data hub, which works with different stakeholders across the industry to manage this data infrastructure. So we work with marketplaces such as Booking.com, Google, to give them data on which hotels are certified. We work with certifications. Here we work with over 80 certifications that provide us data on which hotels are certified. And then we give this work. Then we also work with the different hotel chains in the industry. So Radisson, Accor are some of our clients, where we are their data collection system. So that's, in general, what is called what Because does. And when we come to the destination level, we're working as part of the Good Travel Alliance to build a methodology to identify the indicators that you need for good travel experiences. Now, all of this is about data, and we are a tech company. We're not the experts on what data needs to be collected, how it needs to be measured. Our focus is how do we remove all the reasons for not collecting data. I think you've already mentioned it a few times. DMOs are sitting today and saying, well, I want to collect the data, but I don't have the budget, I don't have the resources. The people I go to, for example, hotels, and ask them for the data, well, they don't have the time either. So we're constantly in this, endless loop of nobody has the time, nobody has the budget, people want to do it. And I was at a conference a couple of weeks ago where a psychologist defined this term as dragon-splaining. And I really like that term. It was basically all the reasons for not doing something, in simple terms. And here,
okay. Can you repeat that for the AI more slowly?
Yeah. So it was dragon-splaining, all the reasons you give yourself for not doing something. And administrative burden is one of the big ones here. So I don't know where to start. I don't know how to collect it. Will others even participate? Will they give me the data? What use will I make from it? What we're trying to do here, Because, is remove all those reasons. We're trying to make it a simple format. I think I had a couple of questions during the last couple of days where there were some people asking me at a DMO level that they get asked how many hotels are certified in their destination. Well, our job here is for you to log into our platform and you can see that right away. We're removing the reasons for you to not collect the data. We're making data more accessible for anybody and the different users. And it's very different depending on who you are.
At a very basic level, nearly every certification program you're looking at is asking you for that variable. Okay? But beyond just ticking the box of Albert and Darcy asked me that question, the next thing would be, okay, so I am at 6% of my accommodation, 3%, 5%, if you're in Scandinavia, 30% of my accommodation is certified. Then what?
Exactly. So let's take it more global. There's 1% certified establishments in the world, right? So what do we do with that? And since we started this work in 2022, it has organically been growing. So we are getting more and more certified establishments, but it's definitely not at the pace that we wanted. There's way too far to go, and we're not even at 2, 3, 10%. So what's stopping that from happening? There was a report launched a couple of weeks ago, I think Booking.com launched it as well, which told about all the reasons, the administrative burden there is with applying for a certification for the GM, for the hotel manager. Now, we looked at that report and we're looking at ways where we can, as a concrete example, to remove that as a reason. So one of the ones is if you're part of a chain and we connect to you on your chain level with your data lake, we can pre-fill the applications that you need to send to the certification. Now that significantly reduces the work that the hotel has, and we're removing a reason. The second reason is, why should I get a certification? Why should I get it? What's the benefit for me on the other side? Well, if we can get that data onto as many marketplaces as possible, then you have all the reasons to do it, because it drives economic value, it drives business value. And that's what we always need to connect it to. Sustainability data is not just something we have to do out of the, it shouldn't just be something extra that you're doing, it should be part of core decisions, it should be part of normal operations, not a side project in that. And that's how we're connecting it to business value. And by doing that, you get the budgets, you get the funding that you need, you get the resources you need, if you can connect sustainability data to business value.
But Jazz, I have never seen a study, a scientific study, right, not anecdotal, that has proven that a certified hotel has, or certified hotels in general on a given destination, have a lower carbon footprint, lower water consumption, lower waste production than non-certified hotels. And we have had sustainable tourism certification for more than 30 years. If for 30 years, one of the most valuable commercial arguments has not been proven, does it mean it doesn't exist?
It definitely does. I think the bigger question to ask is, why has that value not been proven? Is it because of the technical infrastructure that has been missing to prove that value? I'm hearing from different of our partners that these studies exactly is what is coming in the next couple of years. So now that that technical infrastructure has to some degree been established, and we still have a long way to go, we can start analyzing data in a way that we can make decisions based on it. And those, so a data hub is not going to be enough. We need to then build the workflows after that to bring those insights in front of a DMO, a hotel chain, a hotel GM, so that they can make the right decisions, but also the traveler.
Okay, Polly, let me come to you. And we've spent like half an hour doing the first round. So that's what happens when you've got 7 people and you want to have a good conversation with each one of them. But so we'll come back for a second round of questions. Some of you already know what next question is going to be, right? Because I gave you hints in the first round. But Polly, how do we scale this up? Like, you know, Jazz has just said, we've got 1% of the accommodations across the world being certified. Frankly, after 30 years of somehow being involved in certification, I can't see certification as being the tool or the only tool to make, you know, gathering, disseminating sustainability information at scale in a way that is fair. Tell us about who Travelist is and what you're trying to do to overcome that.
Of course. Hi, everyone. I'm Polly, Head of Strategy at Travelist. I've been with the organisation from the very beginning, so I've seen the evolution. For those who don't know who Travelist is, we're a sustainable tourism not-for-profit. We were founded by Prince Harry, the Duke of Sussex, given his experience and knowledge and passion for the power and role that travel and tourism can play to be a steward for destinations when done right. Through a lot of research and work, what ended up coming about was the lack of sustainability information to empower better decision making. So Travelist exists to mobilize the industry to through the scaled sustainability information to empower better decision making. And so what we've done over the past 5 or so years is we've convened, if we're thinking about sort of data as that thread, we've got 3 roles as Travelist. And data has been the fundamental kind of thread between it all, because we know it really is the enabler to doing all of the decision making, to driving the action, to driving the business model shifts, and to ideally transforming the sector into the one that we all would like it to be. The initial sort of focus for us was focusing on who gets that distribution out, who gets that data out at scale, as Xavier mentioned, and it's the distribution platforms, it's the booking.coms, it's the Googles, it's the Skyscanners. So we brought together a small set of travel and technology brands to work together on sustainability. So as a not-for-profit and independent structure, we're able to bring them together to collaborate on sustainability rather than being sort of a sort of competitive advantage. How can they actually work together to accelerate the work so that we're actually moving quicker? So a big piece of work was just getting all of those direct competitors working together. And then the next big piece of our role was how do we facilitate alignment and distribution of data solutions amongst these players. And so what we did, sort of one of our biggest things over the past 5 years is aligning all of them behind a emissions estimates model called the travel impact model for flights. And so all of them, so in the early days you had a Google and a Skyscanner with different methodologies, and we got them to work together to align behind one methodology, which maybe sounds simpler than it is when you've got direct competitors who want to have a brand recognition for unique things. They aligned behind this methodology, but not only did they align behind that, they also distributed it. So they got that out there to the traveler in a way that is usable, understandable, and actionable. And I think these platforms are some of the best platforms to understand how to present information in a way that guides travelers towards the better decision. Usually, they're probably focusing on revenue, on certain things like that. But for this instance, it was how do you drive them towards picking the lower emitting flight. And so what we really saw with that, which was great, was you get that CO2 emissions, and I'm sure you can contextualize this information in terms of flight emissions and travelers in the same way of thinking about CO2 emissions of destinations and decision makers on the destination level is that CO2 emissions figure doesn't mean a lot. Most people don't really know what 60 tons of mkg of CO2 really means. And so how do you contextualize that information in a way that can be usable and understandable? And so what was also introduced when we aligned the industry behind this travel impact model was also aligning them behind a way to contextualize it, which was typical flight emissions. So for anyone who's ever booked a flight on Google, on Booking, on Skyscanner, London to New York, for example, not only do you get given the CO2 emissions, but you get given information to say this is a 30% lower emitting flight than the typical flight. And that automatically just helps to make that decision, which if we all know sustainability is not the core factor in decision making for a traveler, but it brings that to their awareness. And this is very anecdotal, but I say this sort of experience of the London to New York flight. Every single person I've spoken to has seen that CO2 figure. So that means that everyone is becoming aware of that. And to just demonstrate that at the scale, what we have been able to do over the past few years by getting that alignment and that distribution is that figure, that CO2 emissions information has been presented to travelers in over 130 billion searches worldwide. So people are starting to connect my travel decisions with the impact that it has. And maybe we have sort of seen, I don't think I'm allowed to say specific stats, so I apologize. Consumers are willing to pay a teeny tiny amount more for that, but when you think about that on the scale of 130 billion searches, that's actually quite a considerable amount. And so just getting that information out there, I think, is the main thing of just getting that awareness and then making sort of travelers feel like they have that agency to actually change and take some action there.
So we have 7 parallel but also coordinated initiatives at the table. You can see how they operate from individual destinations to advising multiple destinations and so on. One thing that we all know in this room is that there are targets for decarbonization, and I'll just mention carbon, but we could look at biodiversity and so on. We know that collectively we need to have reduced our total carbon, not per head, but total carbon footprint by 30% by 2030, not in 1,000 years' time, by 2030, in order to have a fighting chance of getting to the decarbonization that we need. Any one of our organizations, whenever we introduce any action, we need to be able to say, how is that individual action going to make a contribution and by how much to our target of decarbonization? If we keep doing actions and not connecting them to the targets, we're going to do this, right? And we're going to get to 2030, and what will we do? The same we did when we got to the millennium. Do any of you remember the millennium goals And what did we do when we got to the millennium? We just reshuffled them, and we called them the Sustainable Development Goals, to create a little bit of confusion and also to not demoralize the people that had realized that, nah, we didn't get to any of the Millennium Development Goals. My concern is we're going to do exactly the same thing in a few years' time. And we'll have another conversation around we are beginning to do blah, 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 blah. Okay? So let's go back to where we started earlier on, right? So, Dominique, what hard decisions are you guys taking? When you identify individual businesses that do really well, what disproportionate benefits do you give them to reward them? When you identify businesses that are doing really badly, how do you penalize them, or how do you support them to meet those targets? Or do we not connect the two things?
I don't think we have the power to punish.
Of course you do.
But we can work with those who make good things. I'm back, if you permit. I'm back to the example of mobility, but
yeah.
It's a concrete action. We, with this experience, we can provide special tickets to travel with train, so we can measure carbon footprint we save by this action. So it's concrete. It's something we can measure. It's not the case, in fact, today because it's a work in progress, but it's very concrete. Many people, thousands, dozens, thousands of people take the train instead the car, and it's saving carbon footprint.
Okay. Let me give you an example for the room, and you decide if this would work or not. If your destination has an accommodation tax, could you make the accommodation tax the amount variable, depending on whether people used one type of transport to get there or another? If they came on electric car, they pay less on accommodation tax than if they came using diesel. If the hotel is certified as sustainable, the hotel pays less on accommodation tax. The hotel is not certified as being sustainable. I'm not saying that the politicians will like it, but we are going to have to do a lot of unpopular things to get to the targets we're going to do. I will actually argue something that you may not like. The majority of sustainability actions we introduce in destinations that are actually introduced are actions we know from the beginning will not succeed. That's the only way that we get businesses and politicians to accept that we implement those actions. It's very easy to provide training, right? Because you don't have to listen. Introduce actions that will hurt the people who are not acting sustainably, and then you have a possibility of creating change. Otherwise, there'll be no change by 2030. Marika, would you, in your organization, be in a position, like World Heritage Sites are doing, that if you do not have a reasonable visitor management plan and the site is being damaged, you get delisted because of the unsustainable practices in your properties?
Of course we do.
Right.
Actually, the Grand Site de France label is given only for 8 years.
Yeah.
It used to be 6 years a few years ago, but it changed to 8 years. So it's a work in progress, a continuing evolving and getting better process to get into this project of labelization.
And when an organization or a village is delisted, is this publicized? Is this really noticed?
It depends. It's really it's really a huge thing. I mean, it could be very political depending on the area, but yeah, it's actually a big deal. It didn't happen. Actually, it happened only once in our network. So it's really.
As we know that the pressure for destinations to be environmentally friendly, but also to manage the pressure of visitors onto the fabric of the place as well as the population is growing, how are you increasing the requirements for sustainable visitor management in the, in your sites?
That's a difficult question because the goal is never to attract more and getting more visibility. As I said, the visibility is already there. That's why it's actually reversed. There is a project because the site is really attractive.
Yeah.
And actually, the policy of Grand Site was born because of tourism, because tourism impacted those landscapes so hard and so bad that it needed to be managed. So it's actually the reverse.
But isn't it a brand like World Heritage Site that people recognize and the brand itself attracts people?
It's not really like that.
Are the villages not using it as in their brochures?
They can, but it's not a label, it's not a tourist label.
Okay.
Again, it's a recognition of the state that
Nice.
this site is well managed and there is a project that is sustained by the local people, all the stakeholders, for tourism, but also for agriculture, industry, the politics. It's really a shared project. That is not only a tourist project. That's what we do.
Do you remember the question I asked you earlier?
Of course I do.
Great, go for
and
it.
I'm happy to give you an example after all the panelists have been talking about all this very high technology and also a bit of AI ways of canalizing data in tourism, because in the Grand Site, there is also a little bit of engineering in making converge and merge all the data that can be very sophisticated. Also, it could be cartography, and also very modest data collected by hand, by talking to people, surveys, etc. So I said before that our members are users of data. They're also a little bit of producers because they are on the field and they go to meet people and talk with them, but this is also data. So they have this methodology. We created a methodology to create observatory of tourism in those sites that are specific to the engagement and what they want to do and the lead that take the form of the project in the Grand Site. And I'm willing to share with you an example that may sound a little bit different from what you expected from this panel, maybe. But maybe you've heard of that Grand Site de France, which is called Bibracte Morvan des Sommets. Some of you may know, but most of you never heard of it. I'm pretty sure of that. Well, actually, this site is in Burgundy, and most of the people there feel that the tourism pressure is too high, actually. Whether people actually and tourists come to Bibracte because they feel there's nobody there and there will be very quiet holiday there. So the managers decided to objectify, is that the right word? Yeah. To put some reality in this perception of tourism from the tourists themselves and also from the inhabitants and also the tourist stakeholders locally. So what they did is using a methodology called Evalto, which is like a survey methodology where they had to meet like 500 people on the first year of trial and 500 more on the second year. And what they took from those surveys and questionnaires and talking to people is that actually there is a big difference between tourist perception and local perception, that's for sure. And also there is a perception from all the locals, and mostly from the tourism professional locally, that the tourism here in Bibracte is only like a transition tourism. People are not staying because there's a lack of tourist accommodation. They confront this data to the real data, the metric data, and actually it shows that most of the tourists stays at least 8 nights in Bibracte, and 70% of them are actually in tourist accommodation, like tourist lodging. So this may be anecdotic, but actually it shows how right after that, the politics are giving another shift to where are they putting the public investment, not in tourist accommodation, but probably more into maybe communication or tourist offer, and not investing in that lodging, accommodation and offer.
Nice. Darcy, I'll come to you next. I know you guys are working with Momeration. You're also working with Because, with data integration. Now, I have an argument, and that is, a lot of people say it's expensive to be in green destinations. It's expensive to then use Because. It's expensive to use, and now, oh my God, we have another thing now. We have to work with Greencast and so on. My argument would be, what's expensive is to do all of that if you're not prepared to use it to take decisions. It's not expensive if you're actually prepared to use the advice given to take better decisions, and then you could see the continuous improvement process. I am convinced that you guys have, let's call it a third of destinations that are just sitting there surviving, renewing, a third of them that are actively doing something, and then a third who are up there like, give me the next challenge, right? I want more. And I can, looking around the room, I could almost tell you some of the people who are in the top third, because they're quite outspoken. How do you manage that, when you've got those different needs of users, and when some destinations, the person you're working with really wants to create change, but that person will tell you, I just can't. The environment I'm working with just doesn't allow me to do that.
Good question. Albert would certainly be better at answering this than I would, but if I take a stab at it, I think, one of the things that we're certainly trying to do, and if I think about some of the conversations that we've had just over the last year, for example, about the top 100 stories, is maybe relates to, a part of your question. Top 100 stories has been a very popular green destinations program, but it's maybe a program as well that people have been using as a very first step, and then staying at that very first step. And so part of what we've really been trying to do and thinking about how to do is how to engage all of those destinations to help them move beyond that.
And so the incorporation of then either data from Because or Momeration or both, these are bolt-on optionals for the destinations to then be able to take better decisions, right?
Exactly.
And how do you facilitate, or how do you help them understand, guys, if you really use this data, then you'll be able to do this? How is the usability of the data part of the argument? Can you just walk us through some of that?
Well, sure. I mean, these particular partnerships are still in their early stage development, but certainly what we've been talking about over these past days working with Because is that we know that there's going to be a need for indicator measurement, a stricter, harder need for indicator measurement that we're trying to prepare destinations for, specifically with this particular tool.
And so you'll go somebody like Dominique and then say, look, some of the data, you need to get your house in order and you need to collect it yourselves. In some cases, Dominique will find out, well, in fact, we have some of that data. It's just collected by a different department. We haven't talked for some time. So let's just have that conversation and start to collect that data more often. And some of the things you say, it just makes more sense to outsource it, because then, it can be centralized, it's more cost effective, we can have benchmarking services. We don't have to be kind of holding all the responsibilities for the data ourselves.
Exactly. Exactly.
Okay. Laurent, in this context of there are a number of tools available out there, what does your tool bring in that is different and that you think a destination should really invest the time on this?
Okay, I would say it's the first picture that a destination could take of all these operators before leading them to some labels, for example. Is the
but we're still seeing labels as the destination. I am seeing certification as the stepping stone. What I want to see is the real change in performance, right? So the visitor taking different decisions, or the business being able to reduce the carbon footprint by 10% because they've now understood where to do it. The label is just the means to an end. The same way that, you know, I graduated one day, but, you know, and I used my diploma to then get the job. But the important thing is what I did, not the fact that I had the diploma.
Okay, there is two things. The first thing is that Greencast analyze, of course, operators with labels and operators without labels.
Yeah.
And the green score is not always combining with a label or not.
Okay.
Secondly, we also see that operators engage into a label have a better e-reputation and net promoter score than those without label. So we can imagine in terms of business that operator engaged into a label makes more room nights or reservation, or increase their engaged customer more than those. The two observations we can make now with thousands of operators observe with the tool. But the link between I'm labelized, I have a better green score, it's not always evident, mainly because labelized operators forgot to communicate about their actions. And it's a very big issue that operators will have in the next years, because travelers are demanding information that label normally produce, but the communication of the operators completely forbid to have a strategy on sensibilization, communication, digital communication, but also at the reception, at the departure, etc.
Okay, we're going to change the order a little bit. Polly, we'll come to you next. But since we were talking about businesses, and then we'll go back to destinations afterwards, because I know that the moment we go back to Tarek, we go back to the destination. And guys, we keep jumping from the destination to the business level back and forth a little bit here. Forever, we've been putting together the business case for sustainability. Forever, eco-labels and programs to assist businesses. We've said, this is how you save energy. This is how you attract more tourists. This is the tourist willingness to pay. You know, Booking.com, one of your members, produces an annual report that pretty much everybody cites that says how is the consumer behaving or not behaving. So, but nothing really seems to change, or not really fast enough. What will be different about either the legal context or the kind of pressures from supply chains or distribution channels that will actually accelerate the level of change? You know, what role will you guys play with your data hub to say there's going to be a before and an after?
Yeah, I think I was pondering, because I was assuming we'd sort of have a question like this, and it's kind of that whole why in action. I know you sort of said, let's not do any of that why now. Why, you know, we all know why we need to sort of focus on sustainability, but why the inaction? And I think, you know, we always talk about that intent to action gap, and I think we always sort of just label that to the traveler, but there is that intent to action gap across all the stakeholders. And so I think the big thing for travelers has always been about that systems change lens, which just basically means all of the different stakeholders need to play a role. I was speaking to somebody from a destination earlier, and just her experience working at all of those different levels to actually be able to drive some action is required. So what we are introducing, what we've just launched, is the Data Hub. So this is a platform to collect, manage, and distribute sustainability data in a way that's open access. So as an independent not-for-profit, how do we make sure that this information is available to everyone? And really focusing, I think, on all of the types of operators who might want it. So we're looking at accommodation to start with, but those micro-sized, small, medium-sized enterprises who, like you say, with the regulatory landscape, these new regulations coming in are just putting such pressure on organizations that we already know have that in action, because of all the reasons that the other panelists have sort of mentioned in terms of not having the time, not having the resource, not having the ability. And so how can we as Travelist create this data hub, which basically just addresses or reduces some of that pressure on a lot of those businesses across the spectrum, but also really thinking about the small operators who are having to deal with so many different things. But I think furthermore, it's just looking at all of the different stakeholders within the system. And so the role that I sort of mentioned in terms of we convene, we facilitate, but then it's also that advocating. How do we leverage that information? So data on its own isn't really going to drive anything. Even if you translate it into useful information, we've seen that that doesn't really change a lot of behavior either at all the different levels. How do you start to glean those insights? How do you get that information to the policymakers? How do you get that to the operators? How do you get that to the destination decision makers? And how do you help facilitate some of those discussions, just like we're having here, to really make sure everyone's aware of what's going on? How do we learn from that? And how do we not sort of, like you sort of said, have those repeating conversations where we're all sort of saying we need to do something, but we're not moving forward? So, how can we all maybe next year have that accountability? I think it's the data holds the accountability. The data gives that evidence-based information to allow us to know, are we actually making progress along the way? So, yeah.
So for me, I would say this is a bit like saying, until now, only 5% of people had a watch, and all their watches told you a slightly different time. And now, everybody will have a watch, all the watches will be there for free, and all the watches will be synchronized.
Exactly. So for Travelists, really, our kind of guiding principles are sort of threefold. I'll kind of add a fourth one, but sticking with alliteration, you've got consistency. So you need to make sure that that information is consistent. Everyone knows where they're working towards. The baseline is the same, and you work upwards. Then that's that credibility. How do you make sure that this information is rigorous, is based on the key industry-wide standards, can be trusted, and then compliance. So a big focus for Travelists in the initial stages, we were looking at the leisure traveler, we were looking at distributors, but very quickly realized the policy piece on its own is not going to be the innovative leader, but it is a fundamental piece to kind of ratchet up that bare minimum that everybody in the industry needs to do. So we've made sure as Travelists that all the work that we're doing is right now compliance aligned, but as soon as new compliance comes in, new regulation comes in, as we know next year with the Empowering Consumers Directive, how do we make sure that all of the work that we're doing, that this information is future-proofed so that those small operators, that all the different industries who have so much to deal with in a time-poor state can know that this information meets all the needs that they have. And then I'd say the final piece is that contextualize. How do you then make sure that that information is usable, actionable? And what we're really excited about with the data hub that is open access, that is available to everybody, will be how do we then work with the industry who are the experts in getting that information in a way that can be usable at the traveler level, at all the different levels.
And you now have a pilot product out there that a number of stakeholders are testing, to then see what they can do with it. And I'm convinced that many stakeholders will see additional uses for it that we haven't even considered just yet.
100%. So I think for us, Travelists, and now the guiding principle has always been about testing, learning, iterating. And I think speaking to quite a few people earlier at lunch, we need to make sure that we are allowing those who are doing work in sustainability to try something, to learn from it. Maybe it doesn't exactly do what we thought it did, but not to be reprimanded. I think it's quite easy when people are trying to do something in sustainability, those are the ones that we point fingers at to say, oh, well, they didn't do it perfectly. So we very much think, how do we just kind of get this out there, learn from it? It is in a sort of sandbox test environment, so it's within our coalition of partners currently, but the idea is, how do we see what it could be most valuable for? And I think that's a big part why I was so excited to come to this forum, was just to learn how this could be valuable from a destination point of view as well, because it's such an integral stakeholder in terms of driving forward more action.
So about 8 years ago, for full disclosure, Polly and I met at the train station in London, and she explained to me what could we do. And I said to her at the time, you're absolutely crazy, but you're my kind of crazy. I mean, okay, I want to be part of the advisory group that becomes a critical friend. And I think sometimes I can be more critical and sometimes I can be more friend, and so far we're still there. Jazz, I am absolutely amazed of how your organization has gone from being a one-man band, just getting started not that long ago. And each time we meet, you tell me, oh, we've doubled in size, we're recruiting all these people, we have all these new clients. It's so hard to be a sustainability consultant right now and have a product that is unique and thrives, doesn't just stay there in coma. What did you guys do differently? How did you understand the user needs so you design a product that had the user in mind?
Yeah, so I think one of the most important parts of how we've done that is we've worked directly with the different stakeholders and boxed them in separate conversations. And built, well, technically our hub has, I think, around 4 or 5 different products inside the hub that connects them all in, you can say, a roundabout. So everybody has different needs, demographic needs, etc. And you've been mentioning throughout this panel different sticks to incentivize people to bring sustainability option. I'm also going to bring in the carrot to that stick because what we're seeing, both the carrot and the stick, from the data that we're enabling in our platform, we're seeing, for example, one of our partners, a marketplace, launching a campaign to say, well, any traveler that books a certified establishment gets 15% discount. Now, I know this is not a big thing, but it is the start of an incentive. And here's the stick on the other side, a hotel chain that we're working with, and you said these are the hard decisions. Now that we were able to collect the data for them, and they could see it in front of them from all of their hotels, and we're speaking about 1,000 here. They've launched an operating license or license to operate, where if you don't fill out sustainability, then you won't get the RFPs from the chain. So the corporate RFPs that the chain gets.
Can you spell that out?
Yeah, request for proposals.
And what does that mean?
So when you as a business traveler have to travel to an accommodation and you're a big organization, you typically create an agreement with a specific chain that you will get it at a discount or other benefits. But those agreements need to align with your internal policies. So that could be that you have to stay at a certified establishment or ABCD. Now, sustainability has become part of that request for proposal. And these requests for proposals typically go to Marriott HQ, ISG HQ, Sonesta HQ, and then they're distributed to the hotels. Now, given that they can now see the data, the HQ that I'm speaking about here is saying the only people that will be allowed to give in their bid will be the ones that are doing something on sustainability, that are collecting the data. And that's a force for adoption. Another force, which I strongly believe in from because, is competition. I don't feel like we're talking about it enough. I feel like sometimes sustainability is seen as like, oh, we should not be competing on this, but it actually can be friendly competition. There's nothing wrong with friendly competition in sustainability. I hope that in the next 5 to 10 years, we're seeing an upward spiral where the standards, the minimum standards that we have on sustainability are just moving up because the competition has gotten fierce. So because one of the ideas that we're working towards is how can we surface data down to the GM at a hotel, at a business, to say, this is you, and around you, this is what others are doing on sustainability. I can almost not guarantee, but I do believe that that will drive adoption. And also, looking at what Booking, Google, and the marketplaces where we've, for the past 3 years, distributed certification data to, we're seeing more and more adoption on marketplaces taking this data in. This year, we've added 16 marketplaces who are taking the data and showing it, and we believe we're going to be adding more. So the first year we did it was 8, the second year was 3 because of the compliancy landscape, and now this year it's already 16. So it's driving this adoption that others are doing it. Competition is driving that. So that's what we at Because are focusing on. Look at the user needs one by one, and then bring them together in the end to drive business value, where sustainability is core of that.
Brilliant. I have one last question for Tarek, but then I will give each one of you your chance for 30 seconds to just give us one closing remark on data usage, either something that you've seen or something that you want to see as good data usage for sustainability decisions. But Tarek, I know you've said earlier on, but I'll just remind people, there are 2 colleagues of yours staying here for the rest of today and for tomorrow. If you're interested in murmuration, talk to them. Obviously, all the other panelists are going to be here. So then, over dinner time, feel free to, have a chat with them, or tomorrow we've got plenty of chances to do that. We're not really building in any time for Q&A because there are a lot of you and we don't really, it seems unfair to only highlight 1 or 2 questions anyway. Tarek, you've got an amazing tool, like the level of science behind it. And again, a bit like Dominique earlier on, you didn't come from tourism, you just went into tourism, coming a scientific background. What are some of the biggest surprises you have seen, both in terms of the biggest, most rewarding moments in seeing people use your tool, but also some of the frustrations you've come across when people have underused your tool or misunderstood its potential?
Okay, so one of the most rewarding moments, and there are many of them actually, is that when we show a destination or a user something that he thought he knew, but that hard data proves different.
Right.
We had this in many cases, regarding to even raw measurements like pollution and so on. I'll give you an example of this. When we first worked with Malta, as I mentioned, Malta Tourism Authority is one of our historical and very loyal partners. We were talking about pollution, and they have massive problems with pollution because it's an island, they have a high density of roads and so on, and they were telling us, okay, let's start with this, and to make this a priority to reduce, for example, car pollution in the island. It's something that will surprise you a little bit, but we've proved it scientifically that 75% of the pollution in Malta has absolutely nothing to do with their cars. Right. It comes from the maritime roads that crosses the Mediterranean and that impacts the destination massively. So this was rewarding for 2 things. First, for the, wow, okay, so what to do now with this information? What we told them is that you should put your energy in optimizing the water usage, because this is the problem. Air pollution, you can't do nothing about it. If you stop all using your cars tomorrow, it will not change much when it compared to the World Health Organization standards. So it will not change much. Just focus your energy now. Your priority now is water usage. This is where you have a problem. Work on this. So that's something, a very concrete example, and this is where the golf example that I mentioned earlier kicks in, because this is where we showed them that their sporting surfaces are much more better managed than the natural areas. So they should put emphasis and priority on that. So that was one of these rewarding moments where you say, okay, I proved the locals who know, they are very knowledgeable, that something new that they didn't know about their destination, and I focused an energy on something worthy of their time and budget, unlimited budget and so on. One of the most frustrating things that I face in general is that people considering sustainability today as nice to have, or something that, okay, I don't have or I don't have budget. These are questions that are really outdated because it doesn't cost that much. It just takes some, I would say, positive vibes to take on sustainability. There are no excuses anymore, really. The data is there, it is available at a very good price. It's directly integratable in your decision-making process. Tools exist, we've seen examples already, and there are many other examples. Tools, whether this comes from data or actual actions, there are some fellow partners who are presenting their solutions here, for example, that are very innovative and it's not very pricey. So there are no excuses, really. It's a question of just taking ownership of the problem and acting on it, and that's it.
Okay, guys, so we have the challenge of 30 seconds per person and no more. We'll start at this end and we'll just finish with our host. Darcy.
Thank you. I'll be quick and really just add on to what you're saying, Tarek. I think that today, post-pandemic, I think the world has embraced these questions of sustainability in a way that is much different than what we've ever seen before. And so having this kind of event, having all of you participating, having all of us here partnering and working in different ways is, I think, in and of itself a sign for positive development for the future for all of us.
Okay.
Thank you.
Marika.
I think our members are willing to see in the future that indicators of tourism shows not only that a good tourist season is filling 90% of the tourist accommodation, plus 20 in visitors in this area, but also plus 20 biodiversity has returned to our land, and also this kind of indicators of impact of tourism or reverse impact of tourism is actually what we lack today and what we are trying to work towards to. And thanks to Monovations, to mention just one of the tools that we are trying to work with. So that is more than a wish we want for the future as for tourist data.
Right, 30 seconds, guys. Laurent.
The data, the way that we can observe, treat, analyze the data is changing with the artificial intelligence. And now it's a real revolution for person into observation, because now we can analyze in real time billions of information in real time and categorize and subcategorize, etc. So be careful of the usage of the IA, but for sustainable tourism, it's okay. So
thank you.
I would be pleased to present you the tool.
I would say, I think what we need from data, well, this is what I've been thinking for the past couple of weeks, is a bit more hope. And I think data gives that sort of evidence-based for storytelling at the ground level. Like all of the examples of everyone on the panel, everyone is doing such incredible stuff that's so complementary. And so I think data and the innovations and the tools that can come from this will hopefully give us a bit more hope, so there's a little less inaction and a little less apathy in the sector.
Great, Jazz.
It was a tip, right, on how to use data. Yep. Great, yeah, I just want to make sure. I would say focus on ensuring that the source of your data is correct and that you're using that same source across the different requirements. Because we've collected over 2 million data points across 10,000 data structures, and the source is always a problem. It's always like one person is saying, this is my carbon footprint in the same hotel, and the other one is saying something different. So we need to get to making sure that the source of data is important, and then start small and move from there. And always connect the source of your data to whatever you're reporting.
All right, Tarek.
I'll be very short. I don't have really advice to give. I just want to know your stories, so just come talk to us, and let's see what sustainability story we can write together. Thank you.
Okay, Dominique?
I think it's very pragmatic to take care of sustainability, and our job is to produce the right picture of the situation, and the right picture with positive aspects and negative aspects. So after this moment, we can have the first step is the most difficult step to hide, but it's the first step. I think the way we are here, it's the answer.
Guys, I don't know about you, but an hour and a half for me went really quickly. I had a quick look around the room earlier on to see how many of you were playing with your phones and your laptops, and it wasn't too bad. I think you probably have also got a lot out of this session. Thank you very much. We have a lot more to learn, obviously, tomorrow. I'm looking forward to seeing you all tonight. Could you please, before we go, thank our panelists in the usual way? Now, I don't know if anybody from the organization has any closing remarks to tell us what's happening later on today. If they don't, then the session is closed, and everybody should know what's happening later on. Yeah, it's all good. We're all happy. Thank you very much. See you for dinner? See you for dinner. Okay, thank you.